Hello everyone, it's Albert, and this will be the first of the videos in which I will be dealing with this specific topic, and I've titled this video Scientism and Arrogance. I have noticed that scientists, particularly those who pride themselves as being part of the movement that is sometimes referred to as the New Atheists, believe their qualifications in their discipline make them experts in any discipline. Philosophy, history, religion, it doesn't matter. The opinion of those who actually are experts in those areas does not really matter either. These are scientists, don't you know, and they know everything there is to know, well, about everything there is to know. You can see this attitude in a blog post a month or so back by Jerry Coyne on the relationship between science and religion. And not surprisingly, he pictures it in good versus evil terms. And that would have been up to date if it were still the 19th century and the Whig theory of history were a hot thing. By the standards of historical knowledge in the last 50 years, he only succeeded in advertising his ignorance on the subject, and for this I will refer you to an article by Berezow and James Hannam. I'll give a link either on my website or in the YouTube video for that. Now, simply put, he is wrong. He is not familiar with the academic literature on the history of science, and he is repeating talking points from much anti-Christian polemicism by the historically clueless. Another case of this can be seen with Lawrence Krauss's book, A Universe from Nothing, Why There Is Something Rather Than Nothing, in which Dr. Krauss attempts to answer the conundrum of how something could come from nothing, a premise used in many forms of what are called the cosmological arguments for God. Unfortunately, he does not really answer how something could come from nothing, but actually he tells us how something could come from something. Point no one really held in doubt. Now, Krauss claims the universe could come from a relativistic quantum field vacuum state. But that vacuum state is not nothing. It's definitely something. He does try to wiggle around that obvious fact by defining nothing as empty space. But then again, empty space is not nothing. So he's kind of a failure there also. Now, the problem we have with Krauss's arguments is that he committed the fallacy of equivocation. He used a different definition in his counter-argument than the one used in the cosmological arguments he's arguing against, and hence his counter-argument had no real force. Now, he tried to get around this little problem by inferring, among other things, for example, that Thomas Aquinas, the philosopher most commonly associated with the cosmological argument, would have agreed with him. However, that only demonstrated he really hadn't read anything of Aquinas, as the famed philosopher-theologian had defined nothing as the absence of being, which again, a relativistic quantum field vacuum state definitely is not an absence of being. He also argued that his view was common among scientists a century ago, but this is irrelevant for two reasons. First of all, because the scientists a century ago were wrong, a point conceded by today's scientists. Secondly, because he is addressing arguments by today's philosophers, not scientists from a century ago, and he cannot use the definition by the scientists from a century ago to counter the arguments by philosophers today. He must use the definition the philosophers are using to counter their arguments. This misstep on his part, again, is a logical fallacy, the fallacy of equivocation, and it renders his book utterly meaningless in the current debate. Now, Krauss did little better when he was discussing Jesus in a series of recent informal to-dos with William Lane Craig, when he brought up the whole sort of pagan parallel things, and Craig had to point out that that sort of thing really has no evidence for it, and that scholars reject it, and Krauss seemed a bit taken off guard by that, and surprised, and he seemed to concede the point And perhaps that should give him some insight into his inadequacy in discussing the subject, but don't count on it. Now, however, putting Coyne and Krauss aside, the prize winner, the all-time champion when it comes to atheist scientists making a fool of themselves in public on topics outside their field of expertise, is the most famous new atheist scientist of them all, Richard Dawkins. And this can go back a few years to his book, The God Delusion, where he also tackles Aquinas and attempts to neutralize all 5 of his arguments for God. Now, I'm not even saying anything about Aquinas' arguments for God, but if you're going to counter the arguments, you actually have to state them correctly. And apparently, Dawkins got his understanding of Aquinas' arguments from caricatures in other atheist literature, and not from Aquinas himself. And this brings me back to what I said in the first video, that you should counter people's arguments by reading their arguments and not what friendly sources say about their arguments. Because, in fact, all 5 of his presentations of Aquinas' arguments were wrong. And he simply countered straw men in that case. Now, more recently, his Twitter account gave pre-publicity to Joseph Atwell and the whole Caesar's Messiah nonsense, and made it the latest fad among the bottom feeders on the atheist web, so that gives an indication of how much thought he's putting into this sort of thing. And as a further example, I will offer one more that sort of illustrates this point. What you are looking at right now is a tweet by Richard Dawkins, in which he quoted a statement allegedly by Augustine of Hippo, the famed church father, that women should not be enlightened or educated, as they might cause sexual arousal in pious male students. So, considering that Richard Dawkins always talks about prizing evidence and factual research, did he research this quote and look for it in Augustine's writings? Well, no. He never bothered looking for a source. How do I know this? Well, because it's a well-known quote that appears on many websites. And if you just Google the first sentence of it that says women should not be enlightened or educated in any way, you'll get many, many hits, all of them crediting it to Augustine, and not a single one of them giving a citation in any of Augustine's writings. The fact is, it's a fake quote. No, you'll find no one give a source. It's just as fake as a $3 bill. In fact, that quotation never appeared anywhere prior to about the last decade. I guess Richard Dawkins found this unsourced quote and assumed again it must be true because it confirmed his own biases, and well, so much for the truth. The examples I have discussed illustrate how scientists can leave their own area of expertise and decide they need not study other topics before dispensing their wisdom in areas where, well, they have no wisdom. This seems to especially be the case when dealing with the history of religion, where outmoded theories from a century or more ago are the norm among the new atheist web. They are evidence that someone who is brilliant in their field can make complete fools of themselves elsewhere when they think they have expertise, or that their expertise in their chosen area gives their opinions, often motivated by ideological concerns, a free pass elsewhere. In all things, may to God be all the glory, and until next time, God bless.